All right, let's get into a story that's got it all. Mystery, fashion, a little bit of rebellion, all wrapped up in the history of one incredible city. We're talking about the veiled freedom of Lima. Take a look at this. For more than 3 centuries, a figure just like this one walked the streets of Lima, Peru. She was mysterious, she was anonymous, just one eye peeking out at the world. She was a total icon, a bit of a scandal, and honestly a symbol of a world that's long since vanished. So you've got to be asking, right? Who was she? And what was her big secret? Well, let me tell you, the answer is way more complicated and a lot more interesting than you'd probably guess. First things first, let's put a name to the face, or, well, the eye. She was known as the tapada limeña, and that name literally just means the covered woman of Lima. Her outfit was super distinct, and it was really all about 2 key pieces. You had the saya, which was this long, often pretty form-fitting skirt, and then the star of the show, the manto. This was a thick shawl that she would drape just so over her head and shoulders, covering her entire face, except for this one tiny, very intriguing opening for a single eye. And listen, this wasn't some flash-in-the-pan trend. We're talking about a tradition that kicked off way back in the 16th century with Spanish colonists who brought over some Moorish influences. It then thrived for 300 years before it finally started to disappear in the mid-1800s. But, to really get who the tapada was, you first have to get a feel for the city she lived in. And Lima was a pretty unique place, visually speaking. It was a city totally defined by one thing in particular: balconies. In fact, a writer back in the 17th century came up with this amazing description for them. He called them streets in the air. I mean, just picture that. They were absolutely everywhere, shaping the whole look of the city and its social scene too. And they were way more than just pretty decorations. See, these balconies had this beautiful, intricate wooden latticework called celosías. And that design had a really important job. It meant that the women inside the house, who were often kept out of public life, could still see everything happening outside. They could literally see without being seen. So these balconies, they were kind of like a cage, but they were also a stage. They were a private box seat for the grand theater of the street below. And that brings us right back to the tapadas veil. Because just like those balconies, the veil was a huge paradox. What looked on the surface like a restriction was actually an incredibly powerful tool. So you have the appearance, and then you have the reality. On the surface, it's all about modesty, piety. And sure, it could be that, but what it really offered was something else entirely: complete and total anonymity. And with that anonymity, a woman could have clever, flirty conversations with men out in public. Suddenly, that symbol of restriction becomes a tool for her own agency. It let her navigate the city and deal with people completely on her own terms. And this whole situation was so wild that it really shocked outsiders. Get this. In 1837, a feminist thinker named Flora Tristan visited Lima, and her mind was just blown. She actually wrote that because of the veil, the women in Lima had more freedom than any other women on the entire planet. Now think about that. Coming from a European in that era, that is a huge statement. But yeah, you can probably guess, this much freedom and anonymity for women didn't exactly make everybody happy. Not by a long shot. It caused a ton of scandal, constantly. So that really begs the question, right? Why was a simple piece of cloth so threatening to the people in power? Well, for starters, the official line was fear. The powers that be were convinced that total anonymity was just asking for trouble. They thought it would let immorality flourish, as they put it, right out in the open. Then you had the more personal fear, which is honestly kind of funny. Men were terrified that because they had no idea who was under the veil, they might accidentally start flirting with their own wife, or their sister, or even their daughter. They'd have no clue. And you can imagine, that possibility caused a lot of anxiety. But look, beyond all that, the biggest threat was social. The veil was the ultimate equalizer. You have to remember, this was a super rigid colonial society obsessed with class and race. And the manto, it just wiped all of that away. Under that veil could be anyone. A high-born noblewoman, a native woman, an enslaved person. It could even be a man. It threw the entire social order into chaos. So, of course, the people in charge tried to shut it down. Over and over again, for centuries, both the church and the government tried to ban the outfit. But guess what? Every single attempt failed. The women of Lima weren't having it. The tradition was just too popular, too much a part of the city's identity for them to ever give it up. Okay, so if the law couldn't stop them, and scandal couldn't stop them. What finally ended the era of the tapada? Well, the answer is something nobody saw coming. After 300 years, it wasn't a new law or some big public outcry that did them in. Nope, the end came from a totally different place. It was Parisian fashion, that's it. In the middle of the 19th century, the world was getting smaller. As the elite women of Lima looked towards Europe, they wanted to be seen as modern, and modern meant the latest styles from Paris. So they traded in their mysterious veils for French bonnets, all in the name of progress and a new national identity. And just like that, the tapada vanished from the streets, becoming a figure of art and memory, captured forever by artists like Pancho Fierro. She's still this incredible symbol of a time when the women of Lima found a way to navigate a really restrictive world with so much cleverness and style, carving out a freedom that was all their own. Which really leaves us with one big question to chew on, doesn't it? The whole story of the tapada makes you wonder, can something that looks like a symbol of concealment, of restriction, actually be a tool for liberation? It's a question that's just as relevant today. Definitely something to think about.